Hello, I'm Professor Matthew Rotella, and in this tutorial I'm going to go over vector displacements from Maya for use in, or from Mudbox for use in Maya. Now, you can of course start with any geometry that you want to work with, but I'll just start with the default tree stump here in Mudbox for demonstration purposes. So basically what happens is, to get vector displacements, first we're going to have to do some sculpting on our tree stump. And the difference between vector displacements and regular displacements is that regular displacements displace geometry perpendicular to the original surface normal of your mesh, whereas vector displacements use a color map to change the direction of the ray of your displacement so you can get more varied results and more flexible displacements out of your maps. So vector maps are a little more complex, but a little more flexible. Anyway, going to go into our sculpt tools. I'll make a new sculpt layer, and now by default, I just have the default cracked, what was this, mudcracks.tiff stamp that comes with Mudbox. It's good for a good tree bark sort of texture. But by default, if I just go to paint with it, I'll just sort of inflate the area. The reason for this is that there's enough geometry on my mesh here. So I need to further smooth it and subdivide it. And now one which I can do by just going up to Mesh and hit Add New Subdivision Level. So it'll display the new level, or I can just hit Shift D as the hotkey. And I know I'm going to want to pump it up to about 6, and I'm going to have 466,000 polygons now on this mesh. And with that many, now when I sculpt, which my sculpt layer was on a different subdivision level, going to go up to this one. Now, when I sculpt, I can get more detail out of it. And the higher my subdivisions, the more detail I can get. I have my randomization and my follow stroke path going on down here. You can make note of my size and strength also. But generally, just gonna go around and get some texture on this guy. Now you can see in places down here at the roots where I have a little more density, where I can get like a very high amount of detail out of my sculpt indeed. And anyway, I'm just gonna sort of go a little bit crazy. If you follow strokes downwards, then you can get some more natural looking patterns than if you just sort of drag it all around. But regardless, and I could stand to have more subtlety in how I'm doing this, but I'm really just trying to rush through this for demonstration purposes. And I could paint down here too, but I don't know, I'm not going to worry about it too much. And then if I wanted, I can also paint some color on here. Diffuse layer. And perhaps I will use this sort of dry leaves color on my guy. Turn my strength up, and it's not necessarily what I want. Maybe this yellow chip will give me a more varied result. Regardless, I'm not going to worry about this too much. I'm going to turn my strength down something more like, I'm just trying to sort of rush through and get some results going here. Alright. And that looks like that'll about do it. Alright, so now let's start exporting our maps and get this into Maya, which I can export my selected diffuse layer. I put right into my source images in my Maya scene, which this is just my default Maya project folder, which is all clumped up with all sorts of things. So stump diffuse, and I'll export that. Okay. And now for the big one. So I'm going to select my stump here, and now what I want to do is I want to go to UVs and maps, and I want to hit extract texture maps, hit new operation, and then you can give it a name, but vector displacement map is what I'm going to want. And I want to get it all the way from subdivision level 6 down to my tree stump at subdivision level 0. And I don't need to have my smooth target models selected. Generate one map. Well, let's get a 4K texture. I want my vector space to be absolute tangent. I want to export out a texture here, and the really important thing is that I'm just going from subdivision level 6 to subdivision level 0. And now tree stump VDIS or something like that would be good, and I'm going to have it as an OpenEXR. Save tree stump VDIS, also going right into my source images. Save. No, don't need to do that. And alright, now it's time to finally hit extract. And I got my progress down here in the corner. It'll take a hot sec. Not responding. That's not a good sign, but once this extracts, finish successfully, very good. That's a good sign. Now we can get this into Maya, and we can discover the power of vector displacements. Now, what I'm going to want to do is, if I go to mesh, I can go down subdivision levels, and I want to go all the way down to subdivision level 0, because that's what my vectors are being projected onto, which you can see I can do step level down, or I can just hit the page down button and go all the way down to level 0, like so. Now, File, Send to Maya, update current scene, and it's going to want you to name the files here so they can export the file path. Just hit OK. Export the mesh, and sending updates to Maya, which I should be ready to receive right here. And here it comes. Alright. Alright. So now here, which if I turn on my poly count, you can see poly count, heads up display. I have something with 114 polys that I'm going to make look like has 500,000 polys with the power of vector displacements. So I'm going to open up my hypershade, and I'll start with my vector displacement. This is by far the most important shader. AI standard surface, going to be rendering in Arnold. And here we go. Displacement material, displacement. Don't need this. Okay. Now I'm going to want to make sure that I'm at floating point absolute and that my vector space is tangent. Now I want to select my vector file, my vector displacement file, so I should be at treestump_vdis.exr. Open. And now I want to turn my filter type to off, and my color space should be raw, because you don't want to process your displacement files at all. And all of this displacement stuff should be set up properly. It should function at a scale of 1. But if things are inflating more than you want them to, then you might want to end up turning that down. But regardless, in my color, I want to also attach my tree stump diffuse map, which looks like that. And alright, my specular roughness can likely go up a little bit, at least, because otherwise I'm going to have a shiny stump. Okay. Assign my materials to my selection. But now, finally, lastly, before my displacements will work, I'm going to also have to turn on subdivisions at render time, which are located here in the Arnold section of your mesh attributes in Arnold, in your attribute editor. I want to go down to subdivision. I want to turn the type to Catmull Clark, and I'm going to want my subdivision iterations to be at the same level that they were at when I was modeling in Mudbox, so 6. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit render. Now realize that subdivision at render time gets loaded into your RAM, so if you don't have enough RAM, then you're going to run into problems. But I should be good at 16 gigs. Is good enough for most things. And here we go. Now I'm going to have to convert a lot of these high resolution textures into .tx files, so Arnold's going to take a second to do all of that. But then before I know it, yeah, there we go, 2 of 3 converted, and bippity boppity boo, it should start rendering any second now, and we should see our results. Oh, that was a test I was doing earlier. And there we go. And now if I can zoom in there and get more of what we're working with here. Oops. see, seems we have a few creases that we don't quite want. Which if I just take my scale down a little, they should gradually go away. But which this could also just have to do with if I over sculpted a place, then I can run into this issue where I sort of get these unwanted creases. Which let's kick my let's render this in full HD. Why not? Which if I oversculpt some things, then, and I don't handle it properly, then I could end up getting some creases where I made the mesh like cross over itself, and that doesn't quite work properly. And you can also export a normal map, which could help Maya figure everything out if you're getting issues, which would get plugged into the geometry section of your shader in the same place that you would plug in a bump map, which I can show you. But yeah, effectively you can see that displacement on the edge and all the surface detail that we're getting, and that all comes from the power of displacement maps, and we effectively make a 100-some poly model look like it has 500,000 polygons. And to point out where you can plug in your normal map, I'll just do that real quick, which would be here under bump mapping, and then you can select file, and instead of use as bump, you would tell it which type of space normals that you can use it as. Anyway, thanks for watching, and hope you learned.